Okay, so number 6. Despite his public persona, which was that of a good-natured jokester, Professor McNulty was blank in person, seldom blank a kind word for people around him. So if we look at the components of this sentence, it starts with a contrast trigger, despite. So despite his public persona, which was that of a good-natured jokester, Professor McNulty was blank in person. So we know that that blank is going to be the opposite of a good-natured jokester. So it's going to be negative. Then it goes on. So if he's a negative guy, it says seldom blanking a kind word for people around him. So seldom offering or seldom saying a kind word. So now, if we go through the second blank first, letter A says uttering. So seldom uttering, that really makes sense. So we give that a check. Then seldom sparing. So he could never spare a kind word because he's this mean old grouch. That works too. Seldom writing. So now it kind of is a trap because he's a professor, so you're assuming that he's writing, but it could work, even though we don't necessarily go around writing things about people around us, but we'll leave it in. Seldom hearing a kind word for. So we can't hear something for people, so that doesn't really fit. Then E, seldom reserving. So most likely it's going to be saying a nice word, but we can leave that one in because it could work. So now moving on to the first blank. Letter E says humorous. So if we're looking for a negative and we're saying that he had a public persona as being good-natured jokester, and we're looking for the opposite of that, humorous goes really more along the lines of the jokester. So that's out. Then moving up to C, esoteric. That is a fantastic SAT word that you should know. If you don't, we can leave it in as a mystery. B is cantankerous, which is super fun to say. You might not know what it means, so we'll leave that one in too. And A is dubious. So that one you probably don't know, although you might, because it's a little more common than B and C. So if you do know A, you know that it's not correct because dubious means doubtful. So now that you know that dubious means doubtful, it really has nothing to do with anything opposite of a good-natured joker, which is why we can get rid of A, which leaves us with B and C. So looking at these two words, both are fantastic SAT words, which you should definitely remember. Let's just say them out loud. Cantankerous. Just the tonality of the way that sounds should set off a light in your head that this is probably a negative word. And looking at our prediction, we know that we need a negative. So most likely, this, just from its tonality, is negative. Esoteric doesn't have a tonality either way, so just using that little bit of information, you should probably go with B, which is actually the right answer. Cantankerous is someone who is bitter and who kind of makes jokes that go a little too far. So even though his public persona is one of a good-natured jokester, he's actually kind of more biting in his jokes, and he's really almost like hurting people's feelings. Esoteric is a fantastic word, and it refers things that are known only to few. So very, very complicated intellectual items. So that would always be a positive, which is not exactly what we're looking for here. So our answer is B.